The divorce papers felt heavier than they should have in my trembling hands. Ewan sat across from me in that sterile law office, his eyes completely empty of the warmth I'd known for 15 years of marriage. Gone was the man who used to bring me coffee in bed, who would tear up at our children's school plays, who everyone said was too soft for his own good. In his place sat a stranger, calm, methodical, terrifyingly in control. How had we gotten here? How had one dinner, one moment of laughter at his tears, led to this complete destruction of everything we'd built together? But as I stared at the evidence folder in front of his lawyer, bank statements, phone records, photographs, I realized that the real question wasn't how we'd gotten here. It was how I'd been so blind to think I could get away with it all. 3 months earlier, I was standing in our kitchen, stirring pasta sauce and scrolling through my phone when Ewan walked in from work. His shoulders sagged with that familiar end-of-day exhaustion that came from teaching high school English to ungrateful teenagers. "Hey, Thal," he said, setting his worn leather bag by the door. "How was your day?" I barely looked up from my screen. "Fine. Same as always." My finger hovered over a new message notification, and I felt that familiar flutter of excitement in my stomach. Ewan moved to the sink, washing his hands methodically. "Margaret called. She wants to know if we're still coming to dinner Sunday. I told her I'd check with you." I suppressed a groan. Sunday dinner with his parents was the last thing I wanted to think about. "Do we have to? I might have plans." "What kind of plans?" He turned genuinely curious. "I thought we could make it a family thing. Lila's been asking to see her grandmother, and Toby could use the distraction from his video games." The message notification pulsed again, and I couldn't resist checking it. Mason's name appeared on the screen along with a preview of his text. "Can't stop thinking about our conversation today." "Thalassa?" Ewan's voice pulled me back. "The dinner." "Right, sorry. Work stuff." I quickly locked my phone. "Yeah, fine. Whatever. We can go." But Ewan was watching me now with that concerned expression I'd grown to hate. It was the same look he gave his students when he suspected they were lying about their homework. "Everything okay? You seem distant lately." Distant. There was that word again. Everyone wanted to psychoanalyze me, to make me feel guilty for wanting something more than this mundane routine. Wake up, make breakfast, go to work, come home, help with homework, watch TV, sleep, repeat. Where was the excitement? Where was the passion? "I'm fine, Ewan, just tired." I turned back to the stove, hoping he'd drop it. He didn't. Instead, he moved closer, placing his hand gently on my shoulder. "Maybe we could do something this weekend, just us. Get a sitter for the kids, go to that new restaurant downtown you mentioned." The gesture should have been sweet, but it felt suffocating. His hand was warm and familiar, but it didn't make my heart race the way Mason's touch did. When had Ewan become so predictable? "I don't know. I'll have to check my schedule." "Your schedule?" He laughed, but there was confusion in it. "Thal, it's Wednesday. What schedule could you possibly have for the weekend that you don't know about yet?" Before I could answer, 13-year-old Lila bounced into the kitchen, her dark hair, so much like Ewan's, pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Mom, why are you always on your phone now?" she asked, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Even at dinner last night, you were texting someone." Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I was not texting during dinner." "Yes, you were," 9-year-old Toby chimed in from the doorway. "You had your phone under the table, but I could see the light." Ewan looked between the kids and me, his frown deepening. "Guys, go wash up for dinner. And Toby, no electronics at the table tonight." After they left, silence stretched between us. I could feel Ewan's eyes on me as I aggressively stirred the sauce, but I refused to meet his gaze. "Thalassa." "What? Who are you texting?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could have told him the truth, that I'd been talking to Mason Hyde, the trainer at the new gym downtown, that what had started as innocent conversations about fitness had evolved into something that made me feel alive again. That for the first time in years, someone looked at me like I was interesting, desirable, worth pursuing. Instead, I chose deflection. "God, Ewan, you're being paranoid. It's work stuff, friend stuff." I'm allowed to have a life outside this house, aren't I? Of course you are. Just what? You want to monitor every text I send? Control who I talk to? I turned to face him, letting manufactured indignation fuel my words. I feel like I can't breathe in this house anymore. Everything's so routine, so boring. Can't I have some excitement without you making it into a federal investigation? Ewan's face fell, and I felt a stab of guilt that I quickly pushed away. This was his problem, not mine. He was too sensitive, too needy. A stronger man would give his wife space to grow, to explore, to find herself. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to make you feel trapped. I just miss us. The way we used to talk about everything. Well, maybe if you had more interesting things to talk about than lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences, I'd be more engaged. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, and I watched them hit him like a physical blow. Ewan stood there for a moment, processing, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try to be more interesting. He left the kitchen then, and I heard his footsteps on the stairs, followed by the soft click of our bedroom door. Part of me wanted to follow him, to apologize, to explain that my restlessness wasn't really his fault, but a larger part of me felt justified. Why should I have to settle for mediocrity? Why should I feel guilty for wanting more? My phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't hesitate to check it. Thinking about you. Can't wait for tomorrow's session. I smiled despite myself, typing back quickly, me too. This is exactly what I needed. As I hit send, I caught a glimpse of movement in the kitchen doorway. Ewan stood there, having come back down for something, and for just a moment our eyes met. I saw the exact instant he registered my expression, the smile I hadn't worn for him in months, the flush of excitement that had nothing to do with our marriage. I quickly locked my phone, but it was too late. The suspicion was there now, written clearly across his face. Dinner's ready, I announced to no one in particular, my voice artificially bright. Ewan didn't respond. He just picked up his water bottle from the counter and headed back upstairs, leaving me alone with my secrets and the growing certainty that everything was about to change. The next morning at work, I found myself in the break room with Kendra Oakes and Julia Miles, my closest friends in the office. The administrative building for the school district was always buzzing with gossip, but lately I'd become more interested in sharing than listening. So, tell us about this mysterious gym trainer, Kendra said, stirring sugar into her coffee with a mischievous grin. You've been glowing lately, and it's definitely not from Ewan's cooking. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. His name is Mason Hyde, and he's everything Ewan isn't. Confident, spontaneous, exciting. How exciting are we talking? Julia leaned in, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. We haven't, it's not like that. Yet. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. But the way he looks at me, the way he talks to me, like I'm this fascinating woman instead of just somebody's wife and mother. Kendra nodded knowingly. Honey, you deserve that. You've been stuck in mom mode for so long, you forgot you're still a desirable woman. There's nothing wrong with remembering who you are. Exactly, Julia agreed. And honestly, Ewan's always seemed a little, weak. Like, remember at the company picnic last year, when he couldn't even grill a burger without asking for help? We all laughed, and I felt a surge of validation. It wasn't just me, other people saw it too. Ewan was weak, passive, boring. I wasn't the problem here. But what about the kids? I asked, voicing the one concern that sometimes kept me awake at night. What about them? Kendra shrugged. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just talking to someone who appreciates you. If Ewan was a better husband, you wouldn't need to look elsewhere for intellectual stimulation. Intellectual stimulation? Julia repeated with a snort. Is that what we're calling it now? I was about to respond when my phone rang. Carla's name appeared on the screen, my sister always calling at the worst possible moments. I should take this, I said, stepping into the hallway. Hey, Carla, what's up? I need to talk to you. Her voice was serious, none of the usual warmth. Can you meet me for lunch today? Actually, I have plans. Cancel them. This is important. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. Is everything okay? Is it Mom? It's about you, Thalassa, and whatever you think you're doing. My blood ran cold. I don't know what you mean. Lunch, 1 o'clock, Murphy's Cafe. Don't make me come to your office. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in the empty hallway. How could Carla possibly know anything? I'd been so careful, so discreet. At 1 o'clock, I found Carla already seated in a corner booth at Murphy's, her expression grim. She was 2 years older than me, with the same dark blonde hair, but none of my sense of style. Where I'd learned to highlight my best features, Carla seemed determined to hide hers, under shapeless clothes and minimal makeup. Sit down, she said without preamble. I slid into the booth across from her, trying to project confidence. This is dramatic, even for you. Margaret called me. My heart sank. Ewan's mother had never liked me, had never thought I was good enough for her precious son. But what could she possibly know? And she's worried about you and Ewan. Says you've been acting strange, distant, that you're always on your phone, always making excuses to leave the house. Carla leaned forward. She thinks you're having an affair. I forced a laugh. Margaret thinks I'm having an affair because I bought new mascara. She's been looking for reasons to hate me since the day I married Ewan. Are you? The question hung between us like a loaded gun. Carla's eyes, the same blue as mine, searched my face for the truth. Am I what? Don't play dumb, Thalassa. Are you having an affair? I could have lied, should have lied, but something in my sister's expression made me want to defend myself instead. I'm talking to someone, that's all. Just talking. And you know what? Maybe I need that. Maybe I deserve to feel appreciated for once, instead of being taken for granted. Carla's face fell. Oh, honey, what are you doing? I'm living my life. The words came out louder than I'd intended, and I glanced around to make sure no one was listening. I'm 35 years old, Carla. I've been married for 15 years. And for what? So I can watch my husband cry over student essays and complain about his lesson plans? So I can pretend to be interested in PTA meetings and soccer practice schedules? So you can have a family, Carla said quietly. So you can have two beautiful children who love you and a husband who worships the ground you walk on. Worships? I scoffed. Is that what you call it when someone takes you completely for granted? When they assume you'll always be there, no matter how boring and predictable they become? Ewan isn't boring. He's stable. He's kind. He's weak. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. He's weak and passive, and he lets everyone walk all over him. Do you know what it's like to be married to someone who never stands up for himself? Who cries when his students are disrespectful instead of taking control of his classroom? Carla stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You're talking about the man who worked 3 jobs to put you through your administrative certification program. The man who got up every night for 2 years when Toby had colics so you could sleep. The man who bores me to tears, I finished. I'm sorry if that makes me a terrible person, but I can't help how I feel. And how do you feel about this other man? I thought about Mason's smile, the way he made me laugh, the way my heart raced when his hand brushed mine during our training sessions. Alive. I feel alive for the first time in years. Carla was quiet for a long moment, stirring her untouched soup with mechanical precision. Finally, she looked up. What's his name? Mason. He's a personal trainer at the gym downtown. How long? A few weeks? And before you ask, nothing has happened. We just talk. Yet. The single word hung in the air between us. I didn't deny it. Thalassa, listen to me. I know marriage is hard. I know it can feel routine and thankless sometimes. But what you're doing, it's going to destroy everything. Your kids, your family, your life. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You think you've found something better, something more exciting, but what you've really found is a fantasy. And when you trade your real life for a fantasy, you always lose. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I didn't ask for a lecture. I thought my own sister would be supportive. I am being supportive. I'm trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. The biggest mistake of my life was settling for mediocrity in the first place. I left her sitting there, and Drove straight to the gym. Mason was waiting for me, all easy smiles and casual confidence. When he suggested we skip the workout and grab coffee instead, I said yes without hesitation. For the next 2 hours, I felt like the most interesting woman in the world. Mason laughed at my jokes, asked about my dreams, made me feel seen in a way I'd forgotten was possible. When he walked me to my car, his hand lingered on my arm just a moment longer than necessary. Same time Thursday? He asked, his green eyes holding mine. Definitely. I drove home floating on a cloud of validation and possibility. It wasn't until I pulled into my driveway and saw Ewan's car that reality came crashing back. He was in the kitchen when I walked in, sitting at the table with a stack of papers in front of him. Bills, from the look of it. He glanced up when I entered, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach tighten. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Fine, good. Busy." I hung my purse on its hook and tried to look casual. "What are you doing?" "Just going through our bank statements, making sure everything matches up." He held up a piece of paper. "There's a charge here I don't recognize. West Side Athletic Club. Membership fee." My mouth went dry. "Oh, that. Yeah, I joined a gym. I thought I mentioned it." "You didn't." He set the paper down carefully. "When did you join?" "A few weeks ago. I've been feeling out of shape. Thought I'd try to get back an exercise routine." "That's great," he said, but his tone suggested it wasn't great at all. "How's it going?" "Good, really good. I have a trainer, Mason. He's helping me develop a program." Ewan nodded slowly, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. "Mason, yes. And you've been going there. How often?" The questions felt like an interrogation, and I bristled. "A few times a week." "Is that okay with you, or do I need permission to take care of my health?" "Of course you don't need permission. I just wish you'd told me. We could have discussed it, maybe found something in the budget." "There's plenty in the budget. It's not that expensive." "It's not about the money, Thal. It's about communication. We used to talk about these things." I turned away, busying myself with wiping down counters that were already clean. "Well, maybe if you were more interested in my life, I would have mentioned it." "I am interested in your life. I'm interested in everything about you." The earnestness in his voice made me feel guilty and irritated in equal measure. Why did he have to be so needy, so desperate for my attention and approval? "I'm going to start dinner," I said, effectively ending the conversation. But as I moved around the kitchen, I could feel Ewan's eyes on me, studying me like one of his difficult students. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I was being as careful as I thought. Sunday dinner at Margaret and Alan Vane's house was always an ordeal, but this particular evening felt especially suffocating. The dining room was crowded with extended family, Ewan's brother David and his wife Sarah, their teenage twins, Margaret's sister Ruth, and of course Margaret herself, presiding over the table like a queen holding court. I sat between Lila and Toby, picking at my roast beef and trying to ignore the way Margaret kept shooting me disapproving looks. She'd been doing it all evening, ever since we'd arrived 20 minutes late, because I'd been on the phone with Mason. "So, Thalassa," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "Ewan tells me you've joined a gym. How ambitious of you." The way she said ambitious made it sound like a character flaw. I forced a smile. "I think it's important to take care of yourself, don't you?" "Of course. Though I've always believed that a woman's primary fitness should come from taking care of her family. All that running around I did after Ewan and David kept me in excellent shape." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "I completely agree. Between the kids' activities and keeping house, who has time for gyms?" I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Well, some of us like to have interests outside of domestic duties." "Interests," Margaret repeated, as if tasting something sour. "Yes, I suppose everyone needs hobbies." Ewan shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Mom, Thalassa's been working really hard. She deserves to do something for herself." "Oh, I'm sure she works very hard," Margaret said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Though I noticed she's been quite distracted lately. Last week when I called, she barely said 2 words before handing the phone to you." "I was busy," I said through gritted teeth. "Busy with what exactly?" Ruth chimed in. "Don't you work part-time?" The implication was clear. What could someone with a part-time job possibly be busy with? I felt the familiar surge of resentment that these people always triggered in me. I work full-time, actually, and I have plenty to keep me occupied. Like texting during family dinner? Margaret asked sweetly. All eyes turned to me, and I realized my phone was indeed in my hand. I'd been checking it under the table, waiting for Mason's response to the photo I'd sent him earlier. A selfie in my new dress with the caption, "Suffering through family dinner." I was just, she's always on that phone now, Lila said quietly, and my heart sank. Even when we're watching movies together. Lila, it's true, Mom. You used to put it away during family time, but now you're always texting someone. The table fell silent, and I could feel everyone's judgment pressing down on me like a physical weight. These people, with their small minds and smaller lives, sitting in judgment of me for daring to want something more. You know what? I set my fork down with a sharp clink. I'm tired of being criticized for every little thing I do. So what if I'm on my phone? So what if I have a life outside this house? At least I'm not sitting around feeling sorry for myself all the time. Thalassa, Ewan said quietly. Maybe we should... No, I'm done pretending everything is perfect. I turned to face him, my frustration finally boiling over. You want to know why I'm distracted? Why I'm not interested in family game night and Sunday dinners and all this domestic bliss? Because it's boring, Ewan. This whole life is mind-numbingly boring. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. I saw Lila's face crumple, saw Toby shrink back in his chair, but I couldn't stop myself. I'm 35 years old and I feel like I'm suffocating. Every day is the same routine, the same conversations, the same mediocrity. And when I try to find something that makes me feel alive again, everyone acts like I'm committing a crime. Thalassa, please. Ewan's voice was strained. The kids what? The kids should know that their mother is a real person with real needs, not just some domestic robot who exists to serve everyone else. Margaret's face had gone pale with shock. I think you're being very unfair to Ewan. He's a wonderful husband and father. Wonderful? I laughed bitterly. He's weak. He lets his students walk all over him. He lets you walk all over him. He lets everyone walk all over him. Do you know what it's like to be married to someone who never stands up for anything? That's enough. Ewan's voice was sharper than I'd heard it in years, but I was too far gone to care. Is it? Because I don't think I've said nearly enough. You want to know why I'm on my phone all the time? Because someone actually finds me interesting. Someone actually wants to know what I think, what I feel, what I dream about. Someone who doesn't just assume I'll always be there, no matter how little effort he puts in. What are you saying? Ewan's voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying that maybe if you were half the man you pretend to be, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere for conversation and companionship. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, could hear Toby's quiet sniffles, could feel the weight of everyone's stares. And then, Ewan did something I'd never seen him do before. His face crumpled, and tears started streaming down his cheeks. Not just moisture in his eyes, actual tears, falling onto his plate as his shoulders shook with silent sobs. For a moment, I felt a stab of guilt. But then I looked around the table at all these people who had never understood me, who had never appreciated what I brought to this family, and the guilt transformed into something else entirely. I laughed. It started as a small chuckle, but it grew until I was actually laughing at my husband's tears. Oh, come on, Ewan. Really? You're going to cry? In front of everyone? Thalassa, Alan said sharply. That's enough. But I couldn't stop. All the frustration and resentment of the past months came pouring out. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is why I can't stand this anymore. What kind of man cries because his wife tells the truth? Stop it, Lila said, her own voice breaking. Stop being mean to Daddy. I'm not being mean, sweetheart. I'm being honest. Your father's... Stop! Lila pushed back from the table and ran from the room, her footsteps thundering up the stairs. Ewan wiped his eyes with his napkin, his face a mask of humiliation and pain. He looked around the table at his family, then back at me. You're right, he said quietly. I am weak. Too weak to stand up to you. Too weak to demand the respect I deserve. Too weak to protect my children from this. He stood up slowly. But I'm done being weak. He left the table without another word, following Lila upstairs. I could hear him talking to her in low, soothing tones, the way he did when she had nightmares. The remaining adults stared at me, with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Margaret's face was white with fury. "How dare you?" she whispered. "How dare you humiliate my son like that?" "I didn't humiliate him," I said, but my voice sounded uncertain even to my own ears. "He humiliated himself by crying like a child." "Get out," Margaret said, her voice deadly quiet. "Get out of my house." I looked around the table, waiting for someone to defend me, to point out that Ewan had provoked this by being so dramatic. But everyone was looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was someone they'd never seen before. Carla's warning echoed in my mind. When you trade your real life for a fantasy, you always lose. But it was too late for second thoughts now. I grabbed my purse and walked out, leaving my husband to comfort our daughter and my son, to wonder why Mommy had been so mean to Daddy. As I drove home alone, I told myself I'd done nothing wrong. I'd simply told the truth. If Ewan couldn't handle honesty, that was his problem, not mine. But even as I thought it, I couldn't shake the image of his tears, or the way Lila had looked at me like I was a monster. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "Hope dinner wasn't too boring, thinking of you." I smiled and typed back, "It was definitely memorable. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." At least someone appreciated me. At least someone saw my worth. That had to count for something, didn't it? The next morning, Ewan was gone before I woke up. His side of the bed was cold, and when I went downstairs, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Took the kids to school early. We need to talk when I get home. No love Ewan. No XOXO." Just his initial, like I was a business associate. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then immediately retrieved it, smoothing out the wrinkles. Something about that cold formality made my stomach churn with unease. At work, I found myself gravitating toward Kendra and Julia, desperate for their usual validation and support. But when I told them about the dinner disaster, their reactions weren't what I'd expected. "You laughed at him?" Julia's eyes were wide, with something that looked suspiciously like shock. "While he was crying?" "He was being manipulative," I said defensively. "Crying to make me look like the bad guy." It was emotional manipulation, pure and simple. Kendra frowned. "I mean, I get that you're frustrated, but in front of the kids and his whole family? Whose side are you on here?" And I snapped. "I thought you understood what I was going through." "I do," Kendra said quickly. "I just think maybe you could have handled it differently." "How?" "By continuing to pretend everything was fine? By letting him play the victim while I'd suffocate in that house?" Julia and Kendra exchanged a look that made my blood run cold. It was the same look I'd seen around the dinner table last night. The look of people reconsidering everything they thought they knew about me. "Maybe you should talk to someone," Julia said carefully, "like a counselor or therapist. Work through some of these feelings before they escalate." "Escalate?" I stood up so quickly my chair rolled backward. "I don't need therapy. I need people who understand that I have a right to be happy." I left the break room and spent the rest of the day hiding in my office, avoiding everyone's carefully neutral expressions and whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. At lunch, I met Mason at our usual cafe. He was already seated when I arrived, looking impossibly handsome in his fitted t-shirt and jeans. For a moment, just seeing him made everything else fade away. "There's my favorite client," he said, standing to give me a hug that lasted just a beat too long. "You look stressed. Rough morning?" "You could say that." I slid into the booth across from him. "I had a fight with my husband last night, a big one." Mason's eyebrows rose. "About what?" "About everything. About how boring our marriage is. How he never stands up for himself. How I feel trapped." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "About how I've found someone who actually appreciates me." For just a moment, Mason looked uncomfortable. He glanced down at our joined hands, then back at my face. "Thalassa, you know I care about you, right? You're an amazing woman, and any man would be lucky to have you." "But," I could hear the "but" coming. But I don't want to be the reason you blow up your life. You have kids, a family. That's not something you should throw away lightly. I pulled my hand back, stung. So you're taking his side too? I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just saying maybe you should think about whether this is what you really want. The conversation went downhill from there. By the time we parted ways, I felt more alone than ever. Even Mason, the one person who was supposed to be on my side, was questioning my choices. I drove home in a fog of anger and hurt, rehearsing all the things I wanted to say to Ewan. How dare he turn everyone against me? How dare he make me out to be the villain when all I'd done was tell the truth? But when I walked into the house, I was met with an eerie silence. Usually, the kids would be in the living room doing homework or watching TV, filling the space with their chatter and energy. Today, the house felt empty. I found Ewan in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a manila folder in front of him. He looked up when I entered, and I was struck by how different he seemed. Gone was the hurt, crying man from last night. In his place sat someone I barely recognized, calm, composed, almost cold. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "Lila's at my mother's. She asked if she could stay there for a few days. Toby's in his room, playing video games with his headphones on." "You let Lila go to your mother's? After last night?" "After last night, I thought it might be best if she had some space to process what happened." His voice was so measured, so controlled. It was unsettling. "What's in the folder?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "Bank statements, phone records, credit card bills." He opened the folder and spread the papers across the table, like he was dealing cards. "I've been doing some research." My mouth went dry. "Research into what?" "Into my wife's secret life." He picked up a phone bill and pointed to a highlighted number. "This number appears 47 times in the last month. Always during work hours or when you're supposedly at the gym." I forced myself to stay calm. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." He picked up another paper. "Here's your gym membership. Signed up 6 weeks ago. And here's the interesting part. You've only used your key card 3 times. 3 times in 6 weeks. But you've supposedly been going several times a week." The evidence was laid out in front of me like an accusation, and I felt trapped. But instead of confessing, instead of apologizing, I went on the attack. "So what, you're spying on me now? Going through my personal information like some kind of stalker? Personal information?" Ewan's voice remained eerily calm. "These are joint accounts, Thalassa. Joint phone plan, joint credit cards, joint bank accounts. There's nothing personal about them. You know what I mean. You're trying to control me, to make me feel guilty for having friends, for having a life outside this house." "Friends,"